Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all my Dark Magician Red Eyes, Blue Eyes, Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for April 2024. Been working on this deck for a good while now. I think I finally have perfected what I was going for with this deck, focusing on the three main characters from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. This deck is meant to implement just getting out the three main boss monsters and utilizing their three different effects in different ways when going up against your opponent. As I said, I'm very happy with the result of the deck. I've definitely been working on it for a good while and kind of kept it under wraps because I wasn't ready to actually give you guys the deck profile until I had everything figured out and squared away for it. But I feel like with the numbers I've put for the many different cards in the deck, it could definitely be a pretty fun deck to try out. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters for our first playset of monsters. We're running 3 copies of Dark Magician. I always go for this art. It's my favorite art of Dark Magician. So this is Yugi's main go-to boss monster, having 2500 attack and 2100 defense. It's more of a better option to be able to make use of. Also, being a spellcaster allows you to just use your spell cards faster using this monster on the field. It does require 2 tributes, but I wouldn't say it's as difficult, but definitely one of the more important cards in the deck. So definite 3 of. One of the more important cards of the deck is also 3 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon. This was Kaiba's main monster, so I definitely didn't want to leave this card out of the Dark Magician Blue Eyes Red Eyes deck profile. It literally makes up, 1/3 of the name, so you have to use Blue Eyes. I'm not running Blue Eyes Ultimate in the deck. It kind of slows down the playstyle going into a Blue Eyes Ultimate with 3 Blue Eyes White Dragon and only gaining a 1500 attack point boost for your opponent just to destroy it with something like Sakuretsu Armor is definitely a big minus there. So you just want to stick to just summoning out your Blue Eyes onto the field, because then if you have that, you at least have the 2 other ones to potentially summon afterwards if your opponent were to maybe like Fiendish Chain one of the Blue Eyes and stop it from attacking or using its card effect. But definitely one of the most important cards in the deck. One of the most important cards in the deck is also the 3 copies of Red Eyes Black Dragon. Sadly, I didn't have the art for Joey's actual card. I had to go for the, legendary Joey's World and the Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1 arts. But still, I would say it's the weakest of the main 3 monsters, solely based on the fact that it has 600 less attack than Blue Eyes and 100 less attack than Dark Magician. And then don't even get me started on its defense. It's just completely garbage compared to the other 2. But once again, this is the Dark Magician Blue Eyes Red Eyes deck profile, so you need to run 3 of this card since it's just a very important part of the lineup for the deck to begin with. For some of the other monsters in the deck, I'm also running 6 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. The big thing here, so your opponent doesn't notice that you're running 6 Ash Blossoms, is to run the 2 separate arts. If you have the original art in Secret Rare, which this is not, this is the Rarity Collection, that's fine, but the big point here is just to make sure that you're running 2 separate arts for each individual playset of Ash Blossom. Your opponent won't really catch on as easily if they see you run this one and then the other one. They'll just think you're running 2 separate cards. So a lot of times if you do this, you're at least able to potentially try and activate Ash Blossom twice in the same turn. The more important thing is to make sure you at least try the first Ash Blossom if your opponent were to try and send a card to the graveyard, and then the second Ash Blossom if they were to try and search a card from the deck. 2 different card effects. They won't really notice that you are using the same card. One, the big differentiator there is that you have 2 different arts, so they almost look like 2 different monsters, and 2 different card effects. So a lot of times people just think, oh, 2 different cards. Maybe they were just running a different card to begin with. So definitely 6 copies here. If you don't have an additional playset of Ash Blossom, you can always just, run an empty sleeve with a little piece of paper that says Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. This will make your opponent think that this is the Ash Blossom, and then that the other card you run is maybe something else like Ghost Ogre or Ghost Bell. So they won't really check to read the card after you discard to the graveyard. A lot of times, once a card's in the graveyard, your opponent just completely disregards it as even being a card anyway. And then lastly, for the hand trap lineup, I also run 3 copies of Dimension Shifter. This card is definitely probably going to get hit on the ban list. So if it does get hit, you could probably just run an additional copy or playset of Ash Blossom, depending on how many get hit. So for every copy of Dimension Shifter that gets hit on the potential April 2024 ban list, just add an additional copy of Ash Blossom. I know there's not too many different arts aside from the 2 I showed before, but you could always just put in maybe the piece of paper with with Ash Blossom written on it in this spot, and then you'll have to just invest in the 2 different art styles so your opponent won't catch on there. For some of the other monsters in the deck, I run 4 copies of Blaster Blade from Card Fight Vanguard. I know this is the newer version of the card from the D-Series format, but if you have the original Blaster Blade from the first booster set or the starter deck, you can always run it here as well. And also, it does go against the Yu-Gi-Oh playset of 3 cards of the same name per deck, but I'm not too concerned there because the playset for Card Fight Vanguard is 4 cards, so you can get away with it in this deck. I like to think that a card with 10,000 attack can definitely hit over a good number of different cards that your opponent may have in their deck as well. Being able to even square up against cards like Armatile, which have 10,000 attack to begin with. The biggest weakness with Blaster Blade is it doesn't have any defense, so it can easily be, destroyed if it's put in defense, but it only goes into defense position when you attack with it, so that's your biggest play there. If you don't, attack with it, then your opponent's just stuck with an attack position Blaster Blade as well. Counter blasts don't exist in this game, so I don't see you using its actual card effect too much, but I guess it depends on the field spell you potentially set up to give you additional counter blasts as well. It's a play you have to work towards, but still one that could be very useful. And I'm also running 2 copies of Unknown V and Unknown VMAX. I don't keep up with the Pokemon format, so I don't even know if these are still in rotation or not, but I like to run at least 2 the original Unknown. Unknown is probably one of the strongest Pokemon from the Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver series. Probably not as bad in Crystal, but this card definitely in this game, if you have the colorless energy to use with it, it can definitely add to the strategy of being able to special summon out Dark Magician, being a spellcaster just like it, and being able to use Victory Symbol, which if you use this attack when you only have 1 prize card remaining, you win the game. So I know prize card doesn't come up as much, just as much maybe as Counter Blasts do in Yu-Gi-Oh! But if your opponent is willing to give you one of their prize cards, you may be able to at least make use of that victory grab and hopefully go into a better card. And then using Star Cipher off of your Unknown V-Star, I know you have to wait a turn to evolve your Unknown, and only having 180 attack points will definitely get swung over by a good majority of cards, including Karibo. I think even like Doitsu, the 1 normal monster, may even be able to swing over Unknown, but we have some other defensive trap cards in the deck to at least protect it. And then before we get to the last 2 hand traps, I also run 2 copies of Monkey D. Luffy and 2 copies of Roronoa Zoro. I would say they're the strongest members of the Straw Hats. That's why I wanted to include them in the deck. And Zoro has Rush, so even if you, summon this card on your first turn, you can swing into your opponent with it and then hit them for 5,000 life points. And we only start off with 8,000 life points to begin with in Yu-Gi-Oh! So being able to hit them for that much damage, or even Luffy with 6,000, can really put a dent in their play, because then if they're stuck with only 3,000 or 2,000 life points, if they were to try and use Solemn Warning or Solemn Strike on their first turn, that won't be, too wise, because then they won't have that much attack left. And a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters can't even swing over Monkey D. Luffy or Roronoa Zoro. If you want to go full Zoro, you could take out the Luffys, or vice versa, depending on which one is your favorite member of the Straw Hat as well. And just like with the Pokemon cards, I know the actual cards are a bit bigger than the actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Size, but if you shuffle the cards and let your opponent, cut the deck, it doesn't look as noticeable when you're shuffling, so hopefully they don't mind too much that they could potentially just, be grabbing the Pokemon and or One Piece cards, and then just leaving it so you either draw into a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card or a Vanguard card. And then for the rest of the monsters for the main deck, I run 1 copy of Spore and 1 copy of Cyber Dragon. I know I had Karibo in the thumbnail, but it's mostly just to replace the Spore position in the deck. Being a level 1 tuner, just like Unknown, it can easily be special summoned out of the deck with cards like 1-for-1. So that's why I decided to include it instead of Karibo, which is a level 1, but Karibo doesn't do as much on the field as Spore can do. And Cyber Dragon just being another easy special summon for you to be able to special summon out onto the field and then tribute it for some of the bigger cards in the deck like Dimension Shifter. And then for these spells, I know the majority of the cards in the deck is just, monsters, because that's really the best play to go for when you're summoning out your cards like Dark Magician, Red Eyes, or Blue Eyes, but I still run 2 copies of Pot of Desires. The biggest thing here is to once again make sure your opponent cuts the deck so they don't banish too many cards off the top 10. Being a Pokemon or One Piece card, those are a lot of your different win conditions for the deck, so if you can hopefully at least maybe have it so they put them on the bottom, so then you banish the top 10 and then hopefully draw. I know this card is a big minus for your deck, but I still like running the 2 copies. May even consider a 3rd copy if it does come off of the April 2024 ban list. It could be another spot to take out for Dimension Shifter. And then also the 1 copy of Polymerization and the 1 Fusion Substitute. I can run maybe 2 original Polymerizations, but you can get your cards on the field a lot easier, and being able to Fusion Summon Monkey D. Luffy and Roronoa Zoro into cards like Vegito from the Dragon Ball Super card game is one of the better plays to rely on also. And also being able to fuse Dark Magician and Red Eyes into Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, even though I don't run the card in the extra deck, is another option. And then lastly, the 1 Gold Sarcophagus and the 1 1-for-1. A lot of times with Gold Sarcophagus, it just says banish 1 card from your deck, so it doesn't specify a Yu-Gi-Oh card. So you can just grab any of the other non-Yu-Gi-Oh cards that we're running in the deck, banish it, and then be able to grab it later on. This is great for the one-of cards like Unknown V-Star that we run that you want to just be able to grab even better and quicker to be able to evolve your Unknown into. And then the 1-for-1 is to grab the Spore or the Unknown as well, because for those of you that don't know, Unknown only having 180 attack definitely puts it in the level 1 star category. And then for the traps, I thought of running Infinite Impermanence, but since we're already running 6 Ash Blossom, I think we're fine in that category. So just caught 3 copies of Mirror Force, just one of the better defensive cards. It can protect any card that you have, destroying all attack position monsters your opponent controls. And most of the time, if your opponent's going up against this deck, they don't want to put any of their monsters in defense. It's just too risky with cards like Blaster Blade being able to swing into those cards and inflicting some pretty bad piercing damage. Moving on now to the extra deck. For the Link monsters, I run 1 copy of Link Karibo and the 1 copy of Relinquished Anima. Just more targets for Spore and Unknown. I know I'm focusing a lot on Unknown in this deck profile, but it's definitely one of the tech choice cards that not a lot of other people run in their Dark Magician, Red Eyes, Blue Eyes decks. So one of my better options to make use of with the Link 1 monsters. I also run 1 copy of SP Little Knight and 1 copy of Decode Talker. It's very important that you keep the Decode Talker in the packaging from the 2023 collector tin. Otherwise, your opponent won't be able to recognize if it's access code talker or not, just because it has that shine that it reflects off of the light. When you keep it in the plastic as well, they'll ask what set the access code is from, and you can tell them it's the 2023 Mega Tin, and they won't think otherwise. I also run 1 copy of Metal Pulsar Mystery Freeze Dragon from Cardfight Vanguard. Being a Stride, you do have to discard a bigger cost to Stride onto your Vanguard, and this gets difficult just for the fact that you don't have a Vanguard in this game, and also the Stride cost can only really be met if you discard 2 Blaster Blades to meet the requirement for the Stride cost. You can try discarding Zoro, it being a cost of 3 monster. Makes it a little more difficult, but once you get your Mystery Freeze Dragon on the field, it's all the more difficult for your opponent to be able to respond to a monster that has over 15,000 attack. And since we are running the Polymerization lineup in the deck as well, 1 copy of Masked Hero Koga, 1 copy of Masked Hero Diane, 1 copy of Masked Hero Acid, and the 1 copy of Vapor for the different Masked Hero monsters. The big thing here is that they must be special summoned with Mass Change, but if you let your opponent know that you don't have Mass Change, they may just let you use Polymerization to get these monsters out with your different Elemental Hero monsters that you run in the deck. Same with the 1 copy of Elemental Hero Gaia, and the 1 copy of Nova Master, and the 1 copy of the First of the Dragons, along with the 1 copy of Mystical Sand. I know I'm focusing a lot on fusion monsters in the deck, but you really don't go into other options like Synchro or Xyz as much, because the levels of all the other different monsters in the deck are very, very different, and the only tuner monster we run is Spore, but Spore is mostly in this deck for us to go into cards like Mystery Freeze Dragon. And then lastly, the 2 copies of El Shaddoll Winda. This is just another great way to stop your opponent from special summoning, but in this deck, we don't really special summon. We, call out a Pokemon, we play Monkey D. Luffy, and then we also evolve into cards like Unknown V-Star, and we call rear guards like Blaster Blade. So with this card, we really don't have much of a limit for our own summons while being able to take away from our opponents. And most of the time, you're just going to summon with a normal summon your Red Eyes Black Dragon, your Dark Magician, or your Blue Eyes White Dragon to the field. But that is it for the deck profile. I know I normally show a combo at the end of the video, but this deck was mostly just to update my previous versions. So if you want to see any of the combos, you can check out the previous version I had for this deck, which I think last time I uploaded it was like maybe 9 years ago, but not much has changed since the deck aside from a few tech choices, so the combo should still be the same for this video. But as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.